So I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, and this man has been a godsend for me. He is my direct leader at U.S. Bank and somebody that I hold pretty dear. He's been a mentor to me over the last year and a half. I've had the luxury of working under him, under his wing, learning from him every day on how to grow professionally in this industry. I know he has over 20 some odd years of industry experience. He's been a leader in every role that he's been. So it's my pleasure to introduce Curtis Brooks, and hopefully you guys over the next 45 to 50 minutes will see what I see working with him every day. So Curtis Brooks, hopefully you are unmuted and everybody else is muted, and we can go on and get a good sermon today.
Well, thank you, Santora. So good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. So I just want to give a thanks, Santora. Thank you for that introduction. I want to thank you and Sharon Patman and really just the virtual African American BRG leadership team for really giving me this opportunity to speak. And I just want to tell you guys and tell everybody on the phone, it's not something that I take lightly. So thank you for the opportunity. And for everybody else, I just have to say I am seriously amazed when I look at the number of people that joined the call. It's almost 250 people. So I'm amazed that many people have joined the call. So I hope I don't disappoint you in what I have to share today, and I hope you find some value in it. So thank you guys for having me. So with that, like I said, I didn't take the opportunity to speak to you guys lightly. So when Santora and Sharon came to me and asked me to speak, I really gave a lot of thought about the topic, and I gave a good amount of time thinking about what I wanted you guys to walk away with. And I came up with three things. So there's a lot that I'm going to share with you guys in terms of being successful, being significant. But as you walk away from our conversation today, I wanted you to think about these three things. And it was awareness, reflection, inspiration. And in terms of awareness, what I want to do today is increase attention to a different side of the coin, so to speak, about achieving success that maybe we haven't considered or maybe we haven't considered enough. So I wanted to bring a measure of awareness to everybody on the call. And then the second thing I wanted to do with reflection is that I wanted to hold up a mirror for us, for you guys, for me, hold up a mirror for us to be able to see ourselves through a different lens and cause us to reevaluate our words and our thoughts, cause us to reevaluate our behaviors, and cause us to further evaluate our skills when we think about being successful. And then the last thing that I ultimately wanted to do with inspiration is that I want you guys to take action. I don't want you guys just to come and get awareness and have some time to reflect. But the key thing when you walk away today is really to take action. I want to inspire you to reach confidently, to reach further, and to reach smarter toward achieving your goals. That's the end result today, to inspire you guys to take action in ways that make sense for you, where you are in your development, where you are in your career, and where you want to take your career in the future. So as I talk about success, I want you to keep those three items as your frame of reference. Does that sound fair? So I know you guys are on mute, so I'm gonna assume everybody just said yes. So before I go forward, I know we're all working at home, with COVID-19, with Corona. So I want to give a quick disclaimer. I'm also working at home, so if you hear a little bit of noise in the background, those are my three kids. They should be doing homework, but they may be on break, quote unquote. So if you hear some noise, those are the kids in the background, so to speak. So as I talk about success, here's what I thought about. I put it in terms of my own experience. And here's my experience. I'm an avid reader. I love to read. And at any given time, I may be reading a book, a magazine, or an article. I'm always reading something. And when I pick out a book to read, I typically look at the title, and then I flip to the end of the book, and I read the last page. And based on the title, and more so what I read on that last page, I decide to buy the book or put the book back on the shelf. That's my strategy. That's what I do. That's how I choose books to read. Now, sometimes that strategy doesn't work, but most of the time it does. And what's interesting about my strategy is that I haven't read the book, so I don't have any solid context to interpret that last page. So for me, that last page simply sounds good. It's intriguing in some sense, so I make a gut decision to buy the book. And the other thing that's interesting is that when I finally read the entire book and I come back to that last page, the words seem to come to life, and they seem to jump off the page, and they make perfect sense for me. So when I thought about our time today, I figured I would use that same strategy. So the title of what I want to share is Becoming Significantly Successful. And the words on the last page read, the best way for us to succeed collectively as African Americans is to be successful individually. Be significantly successful yourself first, and then look around you and find someone you can help succeed in some way. I'm Curtis Brooks. I'll make a difference in you too. Now that sounds jazzy, right? So I'm imagining everybody is saying, yeah, that sounds pretty jazzy. It sounds jazzy, but remember, you don't have the context just yet. It just sounds good. So who is Curtis Brooks? Who am I really? You know, you heard Santura introduce me, but really, who am I? I've been with U.S. Bank just a little bit over 2 years, and I lead our content curation and strategy group within our enterprise education group, or our enterprise training team. And beyond that, you know, I've been in learning and development, like Santura said, for nearly 20 years, and I worked in various leadership positions, leadership roles, and I've spent most of my career in the financial services sector, working for companies like JPMorgan Chase and Bank of America, you know, some of our competitors. Beyond that, I have a degree in psychology and business management, so I'd like to think I know something about people and business. Probably need to learn a whole lot more. And in the next year, I should finish up a master's degree in leadership and organizational development. So from an educational perspective, you know, I've been busy for the last year and probably will be pretty busy for the next year or so trying to finish up that degree. Now, what I've shared with you guys is what I do, but it really doesn't tell you much about who I am. And I tend to think who I am and why I exist are much more important than what I do. So again, who am I? Who is Curtis Brooks? Well, I'm a husband. I've been married for nearly 20 years, and in this day and age in 2020, I would say being married nearly 20 years qualifies as being significantly successful. I'm a father. I have 3 kids. I have a 16-year-old son, Nick, as you see here. Nick's learning how to drive, and as you guys can imagine with teenagers, or if you've had teenagers, you know, he's stressing us out quite a bit with his driving. I have two daughters, Morgan, as you see here, who's 10, the taller one, and then Madison is 8. Morgan plays select softball. She's a primary catcher, so most of our free time and time that I don't have free, you know, we spend following Morgan to practice and in different tournaments throughout Texas where we live. And then my youngest, like I said, Madison is 8. She's an up-and-coming gymnast, and so she finally made her first gymnastics team, so we're looking forward to watching her start competing. I'm a small-town guy. I'm originally from East Texas, and if you know anything about East Texas, it's the country. Tall trees, tall grass. You can see the stars brightly at night. That's where I'm from. And I grew up on a farm, basically. And when I was younger, we raised our own food. So, you know, we had cows and we had chickens and, you know, we had huge garden fields. And, you know, as I reflect back on my time growing up in the country, I think the country is where I first learned some of the principles of success that I want to share with you guys today. So some of those principles. So, for example, growing up in the country is where I first learned to step back from a situation, to assess it, to think it through, to develop a plan, and then execute. I learned that in the country, but I can't tell you how many times that's benefited me in my professional career in corporate America. So like I said, I'm from the country, and in the country, as we say in the country, rather, I'm the baby boy of my family. I'm the youngest of 8 living kids, and get this, my youngest sister is 14 years older than me. So I'm going to pause and just let that sink in. I'm definitely the baby. And, you know, some people would call me a mistake, but what I tell them when they say that is I was born exactly when I was supposed to. I was born in the 70s. I wasn't made for the 50s and 60s, but I appreciate the people who were born in the 50s and 60s. And as a matter of fact, you know, my brothers who were born in the 50s and 60s, they've all in one way or another acted as my first mentors and coaches. So while I'm a 70s baby, I definitely appreciate you guys who were born in the 50s and 60s. And I would probably say the last thing that I'll share about myself is probably the most important thing, which is that I believe everyone is created for a purpose, and that purpose will lead you to success only if you let it. And in my journey, I'm growing in a realization it's just not about being successful. You know, it's about being significant. And for me, being significant allows me to make an impact on the people I meet. Being significant is about walking in my purpose. And once you find out what your purpose is, the reason why you exist, then what you do to fulfill that purpose can take many shapes and forms. And here's what I mean. Here's an example. I exist to provide people an opportunity to be successful in their jobs, in their careers, and in their marriages. That's my why. That's why I exist. Now, what I do to accomplish my why takes many forms. Forms like I create learning strategies. I build and shape training teams. I provide leadership development. I mentor. I coach. I participate on panel discussions. And like I'm doing today, I'm starting to deliver keynote conversations. So what I do to accomplish my why takes many forms. But the key is you have to figure out what your why. And as a matter of fact, that leads us to the first key of being significantly successful. The first key to making a difference, the foundation to being significantly successful, is living in your purpose. And not only does living in your purpose bring success, it brings a side effect called inner peace. And in the day and time and age that we're all living, I think everyone can use a dose or 2 or 3 or 4 of some inner peace. So as we talk about success, I want to point out that there are probably hundreds of principles for being successful. And they're probably all valid in some shape, form, or fashion. But they apply to everybody in different ways and to different degrees. So keep in mind, as I share some more of my principles, again, just keep in mind these are principles that have worked for me. And they could work for you too, but you may just have to apply them differently than I have in my career. Does that make sense? And I hear a virtual yes, so we'll keep going. So last month was Black History Month, and it was a time to celebrate the sacrifices and celebrate the accomplishments of African Americans. And author Terry Pratchett said this, and I'm just going to read it. She said, "It's important to know where you come from, because if you don't know where you come from, then you don't know where you are. And if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going wrong. Now, when I think about her words, when I think about her sentiments, they make perfect sense for me. Because for me to know where I'm going, I need to know where I came from. I need to know my history. And as a matter of fact, it's critically important that we all acknowledge our history, whether it's our family history, the history of our country, the history of the organizations we belong to, and the history of the companies that we work for. And as I reflect on our history, it makes me proud and it really inspires me. And I tend to believe those who came before us did, I can. And when I think about those who came before us, I often find they developed a language to help them be successful. And not only did their language help with success, it more importantly helped with survival and protection during a much harsher America. When I read the research on the effects of language, and more specifically how the words we use have impacts on our behavior, I'm simply amazed. And what amazes me is the research indicates that we respond to words at an instinctive and unconscious level. And understanding the impact of words on the brain can help us be better leaders. It can help us be better parents, be better negotiators, and quite frankly, it can help us be better at any role we find ourselves pursuing. As I read further, I found that because we physically hear the words we say to others, and more importantly, we hear the words we say to ourselves, we could be unintentionally telling ourselves that a situation, that an environment, that an interaction is a problem, when really it's simply a puzzle we expect to solve. Now, that's impactful for me because telling myself that XYZ obstacle is a problem I can't overcome sends a completely different message and therefore has a completely different effect on my behavior than telling myself XYZ obstacle is a puzzle I expect to solve. Now, that's impactful in my book, people. I found other research on the power of psychology of words on our minds. And it revealed not only can words change our emotional state or express how we feel, but words are accurate predictors of our behavior and our mental state. Now imagine that. Not only can words predict our behavior, our words can predict our mental state. So if we want to be successful, not only should we look back at our history of success, but we need to analyze the words and the phrases that those who came before us may have used, but are no longer 100% relevant today, and may in fact be holding us back from greater success. We need to look at the words, the phrases, the language that's so commonly accepted and so subtle that it's not readily recognizable. Have you guys heard of these phrases? Have you guys heard of them? So I'm just going to pause, and I'm hearing a virtual, yes, I've heard of some of these. Yes, I've heard of all of these. As a matter of fact, not only have I heard of them, I've used them until I realized the impact that these words and these phrases were having on me and ultimately on my career. So let's check out a few of these. So I'm going to read the phrase and then I'm going to tell you what the potential impact is from my experience and my opinion. So here's the phrase: work hard and keep your head down. Have you heard that? Mm-hmm. Well, here's the impact of that phrase. You don't get noticed, or you don't get noticed as quickly as your peers. Or what about the phrase, don't be too smart, don't sound too smart all the time? Well, the impact is your peers and your leaders don't have an opportunity to observe the full breadth and depth of your intelligence, your experience, and your creativity. What about don't sing your own praises? I definitely grew up with that one. The impact, though, is that you're not effectively marketing yourself and most likely getting overlooked. And I can definitely tell you that was the case earlier in my career. What about the phrase, don't be too smart and too black, because they won't let you succeed? The impact here is a self-limiting barrier that restricts your authenticity, it restricts your potential opportunities, and it hampers your strive for advancement. And then the last thing here is they are different than me. They have different upbringings than I do, a different background. They have different experiences and different problems. And you know what? That may be true. But the fact is, while we do have differences, we're more similar than we are different. So just find the similarities and simply connect on those points. Now, I'm not making light of these words because there was a time where all of these words were valid. There was a time where these words were words of survival. And as a matter of fact, we could probably make a case there are a few of these words that are still relevant today. But it's also quite possible that while all these words were relevant during the past, they may not be completely relevant today. But many of us, without even realizing it, are still using these phrases. The language and the words we use have impacts on our behavior, whether we knowingly recognize it or whether we don't. And most times we may not even recognize the impact of our language because it's so subtle. But the effects of those subtle impacts add up over time. And it can add up to be influences pushing us to success or influences that limit our advancement. Our individual and collective language is a differentiator for success or failure. It's a differentiator in perception of opportunity or lack of opportunity. It's a differentiator in confidence or lack of self-confidence. And our language is a differentiator in feeling happy or tired or feeling burdened and overwhelmed. So it's important we become acutely aware of the words we use, that we challenge our commonly accepted phrases, and if necessary, change our language, because our thoughts influence our language, and our language influences our behavior, and our behaviors ultimately lead us to success early in our career, to success later in our career, or possibly even to failure. Now, guys, I have a cousin who's a therapist, and she once shared this story that I want to take time to share with you guys because, you know, I think that it's relevant between the connection, or relevant to show the connection between language and behavior. So I just want to read it to you. Here is the story. So my client was clearly exhausted. He laid back on my couch as tears rolled down his face. He was going into detail about how many people he was responsible for. He explained that I'm trying my best to continue to reach their expectations. Why, I asked? Because service and helping others is free. It doesn't cost me anything to help others. I sat in silence and just looked at him. What's that look for, he asked. Because you fooled yourself into believing that your behaviors aren't costing you anything, when in fact, your behaviors are costing you everything. So that takes us to the second key of being significantly successful. The second key to being significantly successful is our language. Without a doubt, we should acknowledge our history and acknowledge the sacrifices made for us to live a life of freedom we live today. And in acknowledging our history, we should be very mindful of the language we use with other people. We should be very conscious of the language we use with ourselves, because it has real impacts on our behavior and therefore our ability to be successful. And guys, quite frankly, our language impacts our ability to be successful at life in general. As I look back on the past, I believe we can be successful in the future because of our achievements in the past. I wear a wristband with a quote on it from William Shakespeare, and the quote reads like this: "Some people are born into greatness. Some people achieve greatness, and others are thrust into greatness." Now, I think that's a powerful statement, and I think what Shakespeare meant was some people are born into families that have status, whether it's wealth status or sports status or some type of power status. You're great simply by family association. You're great by birth. And others are thrust into greatness, meaning the individual, because of how they handle some dire situation, is considered great. So, for example, the soldiers who are awarded the Purple Heart, they received this honor because of their heroic actions and therefore were thrust into greatness. And then Shakespeare says, and some people simply achieve greatness. These people weren't born into greatness by birth. They weren't thrust into greatness by their heroic actions. No, people in this category use their knowledge, they use their skill, their talents, their abilities, and they use their passion to create greatness. And in some cases, they overcame great odds to achieve a measure of greatness. You know, as African Americans, we've come a long way in simply achieving greatness. For example, take a look at these names. Rosalind Brewer, Chief Operating Officer of Starbucks. Check out Ted Colbert, the CEO of Boeing Global Services. Or what about Ron Parker, President and CEO of the National Association of Securities Professionals? Or Greg Adams, Chairman and CEO of Kaiser. Yeah, as African Americans, we've come a long way in simply achieving greatness. But considering how much progress we've made, the corporate playing field is still not completely level for people of color or for women. Competing on an unlevel playing field is a hindrance. It's a real hindrance. It doesn't feel good, and as a matter of fact, it causes tremendous roadblocks. However, unlevel playing fields should never be allowed as an excuse for not succeeding. Acknowledge that it's a real hindrance. Acknowledge the unlevel playing field is a real roadblock, but never allow it to define your outlook for success. Here's some examples of what I mean about succeeding on an unlevel playing field. And I'm going to go back in history a little bit. Reflect on Harriet Tubman, who created the Underground Railroad and led slaves to freedom from the South to the North. Did Harriet Tubman have a level playing field? Nope, she absolutely didn't. And failure meant life or death for her and life or death for those she was leading to freedom. Yet, she led hundreds of slaves to freedom, and she never lost a passenger. Now, if Harriet Tubman can succeed on that playing field, we can succeed on the corporate playing field where it's not a matter of life or death. Take a walk with me over to New Orleans, and let's meet Ruby Bridges. In 1960, at 6 years old in the segregated South, Ruby Bridges was one of 6 black children to integrate the public school system. Mrs. Bridges didn't have a level playing field, but she graduated, and she went on to receive a Presidential Medal of Honor in 2001. And I could keep going on with examples from former U.S. Army General Colin Powell to Ronald McNair, who was the second African-American to visit space, on to Pat Locke, the first African-American woman to graduate from West Point, even on to Motown's Berry Gordy. And I believe many of you probably have your own meaningful examples about succeeding on an unlevel playing field. My point is this: all these people and many of us, we weren't born into greatness. They weren't thrust into greatness, but they achieved greatness and did so by overcoming great obstacles and huge roadblocks. They achieved greatness on an unlevel playing field by standing in their power and finding opportunities in the midst of their situation. They achieved greatness by consistently learning, reflecting and growing, and by actively making their life what they wanted to be. They achieved greatness by fulfilling their why. And because we stand on their shoulders, we can achieve success today and tomorrow. And that brings us to the third key to being significantly successful, which is never allowing ourselves to use an unlevel corporate playing field as a reason for not advancing toward our goals. Is it unfair? You bet it is. Do we deserve opportunities to compete on level playing fields? Absolutely, you bet we do. But until we level the competition, never allow an unlevel field to prevent you from achieving success. Have you guys ever thought, I wish I could advance faster in my career? Have you ever felt like your career is successful, but somehow it stalls and you don't know how to move forward? Have you ever had the thought, I just need an opportunity to prove myself? If you've had those thoughts, I can tell you you're not alone, because I've had them during my career. And I've even said to myself, you know, what am I doing wrong? And I just can't figure it out. I've had those thoughts. And when I think about the progress we've made as people of color and women, we've made some noteworthy strides, but not the type of progress we should have made by 2020. So quite possibly, we have a significant number of minorities and a significant number of women who, like me, are saying, what am I doing wrong? Exactly what do I need to do more of? I just can't figure it out. Look at this data. More than 2 million African Americans have advanced degrees. That's significant. Yet only 3.2 of executives and senior manager level employees are African Americans. That's also significant, but for a different reason. There are only 4 black CEOs at Fortune 500 companies. And that data was as of December 19. Again, significant, but for another reason. Despite being ambitious, having strong professional networks, and being career-driven, black professionals face slower career advancement. Again, significant, but for a different reason. So as we consider this data and at the same time recognize our progress, the question is still, what's preventing us from achieving more senior level roles? What is it? What is it? The easiest answer, the surface level answer, is that there are still unresolved conscious and unconscious biases. There's still unresolved discriminatory thinking and behaviors related to skin color and perceived abilities. The easiest answer is the bias of familiarity, meaning we hire who we're familiar with, who we can relate to in some sense. We promote those most like us in some aspect, and we advance those who make us the least uncomfortable in one form or another. Those are the surface level answers, the most obvious answers. And I believe we have to continue addressing and overcoming these real issues in the political arena in government and legislation, in the private and public business sectors, and more importantly, all Americans, regardless of our color, regardless of our nationality or gender, should discuss and resolve these issues in the privacy of our own homes and with those we associate with on a regular basis. You see, it's not a black or female or minority problem we're facing that we need to address. It's an American puzzle we need to collectively solve. As I've grown professionally, I've learned there are always two sides to a coin. Now, I may not always understand the other side of the coin. As a matter of fact, I may not always agree with the other side of the coin. But just because I don't understand or agree doesn't make the other side of the coin wrong or right. It does mean, though, that I need to flip the coin over and at least consider what's happening or not happening on the other side. So with that perspective, let's take another look at what may be also preventing us as minorities and women from achieving greater executive roles. I'd venture to say that most of us, probably unknowingly, attribute external factors as the roadblocks slowing and preventing our progress in achieving career goals. Externalism factors such as ageism and racism and sexism, classism, good old boy clubisms, or other external factors like not enough time in the day or not enough support, whether that's emotional or financial support, not the right time in my life, or it costs too much, or they won't let me. And the list could go on and on and on. And I also venture to say that none of these external factors that I just mentioned should be discounted because each has a level of validity for all of us. Yet, considering their validity, another not so visible factor that prevents us from achieving more of our career goals is internal. It's an internal factor. I believe if you and I were to sit alone contemplating, being truly transparent with ourselves, we would discover and conclude, if only to ourselves, that our internal automatic negative thoughts and not only the external factors have held us back from greater success year after year. There's an author by the name of Rick Carson, and he calls these automatic negative thoughts gremlins, and we all have them. And I can guarantee you, I have gremlins myself. And these things called gremlins, these are negative messages that we tell ourselves. And some of these messages are overtly negative, but others are disguised as positive messages, but are essentially negative and harmful. At times, we may have some awareness of these mental gremlins, and at other times, we may not be aware of them at all. As a matter of fact, you probably have a few gremlins talking right now, if you think about it. These negative thoughts are so habitual and so natural that you don't readily recognize what's happening inside you. The thing about the gremlins is you may be personally responsible for programming the gremlins based on your own experiences. Other negative thoughts may have been accepted, internalized, and therefore programmed by well-intended family, friends, and leaders. And yet other gremlins may have been programmed by persons with negative intent. In either of those cases, my point is this: our automatic negative thoughts, our gremlins, are in a very real way limiting our ability to be successful year after year. So I want to share with you guys another story, again, from my cousin who's the therapist. And what this story does is it reflects the power of automatic negative thoughts on our behavior. And I'm just going to read it for you. So I could tell instinctively that she had given up the fight. I'm done, she said while exhaling. Done with what? I asked while knowing exactly what she was talking about. This client had been running in circles trying to make sense of her life, doing the same things but expecting different results. She was tired now, and I could tell. I'm proud of you, I told her. She looked confused. Proud of what exactly, she asked. I'm proud of you for finally seeing that for your life to change, that you sometimes have to be prepared to stop, look at yourself, and change your behaviors. She smiled at me. Why didn't you just tell me to stop, she asked. I smiled back at her. I did, but you weren't ready to hear me. Now, people, that's a powerful realization. And quite frankly, while we're competing on an uneven corporate playing field against a defense that prevents faster progress, our own internal programming, our own internal offensive playbook may be doing as much damage toward our ability to advance in corporate America as the defense. Now, that's a different side of the coin we each need to explore for ourselves. Because if it were just racism, if it were just sexism, or good old boy clubisms, or ageisms, or classisms, all of which are still very real, then we would have never seen the likes of Colin Powell or Barry Gordy or Harry Tubman or the countless others who achieved success in the face of ridiculous obstacles. No, these achievers recognized and overcame their own negative thoughts as they faced the very real isms. So the fourth key to being successful is recognizing the negative thought patterns that may affect your own perception of your ability to be successful, and therefore negatively influence your actions to take smart, calculated risks that have higher and faster career returns. Now, before we walk away from the flip side of the coin, let's take another look. Not only is it possible that our negative thoughts are getting in our way, but maybe, just maybe, we aren't completely aware of the rules of the game in which we're competing. Consider that. And I told you guys I was from Texas, East Texas. And back in East Texas, I grew up playing baseball and basketball. And I know from experience, those sports have a set of rules that govern the game and therefore govern success. Now, probably like many of you, I know why the rules exist in the game of sports, but I wanted to know what Google had to say. So I looked it up. And Google said, and I quote, Google said, rules provide an agreement of understanding the competition. In sports, rules define what is allowed or not allowed to occur in situations on and off the court. Rules govern anything from wearing proper uniforms to how to keep score during the game. The rules of the game apply to players, coaches, and officials, and rules vary among different sports and age groups. Now think about what I just said. Google just gave us some critical insight, which is everyone who's involved in the game on the court and even those associated with the game off the court has a set of written rules they have to follow. When I played basketball, when I played basketball, and more so when I watched my wife coach softball, I noticed something interesting about the connections between the athletes, the rules, and the outcome of the game. And I saw it over and over and over firsthand with my wife's softball teams. And the teams who had superior athletes with good talent, would get beat by teams with less talented athletes. And the difference maker was most always the rules. You know, when my wife coached, She probably wouldn't like me saying this, but when my wife coached, she was never blessed to have a team of super athletes. But she knew the game, and she taught the game extremely well. She taught the rules extremely well to her athletes. And as I sat in the stands every week and watched, I would see her use the rules to coach her team to a win. And what was happening was a less athletically talented group of athletes were winning games because they had a coach who not only knew the rules, but she knew how to apply the rules for the team's advantage. Now, people, that's power in my book. That's real power. Many of us as minorities and women are talented corporate athletes. We're gifted with education. We're gifted with experience, with business savvy. We're gifted with wisdom and discernment and so on. But it doesn't matter how talented we are. If we don't know the written rules of the game, we leave ourselves open to being on the losing end. So to get clear in my understanding, I went back to Google to learn about the unwritten rules of competition. And this time, Google said, and I quote, "There's another category of workplace rules that's not written down anywhere. Not only do they govern the way things actually get done, regardless of anything else you may have heard, but they also define the culture of the organization. Though they aren't documented, they are certainly observable in the workplace." So again, listen to what I just said. Google just gave us some more critical information, which is you can't succeed in a game for which you don't know the written and unwritten rules. Nor can you succeed in a game where you don't know how to make the rules work for your advantage, even if you are the more superior corporate athlete. I've worked in corporate America for more than 20 years. And during that time, I've heard professionals say they aren't going to play the corporate game. Or I've heard them say they aren't good at playing the corporate game. So here's the tip, y'all. If you're working in corporate America, you're already in the game. And if you're not good at playing the game, that's an indication to me that you may be on the losing end of competition. The losing end of competition feels like continual and prolonged discouragement. The losing end sounds like bewilderment and frustration. The losing end looks like your peers getting promoted faster and earlier than you are. And I can guarantee you the losing end ain't fun for no one. So the fifth key to being successful is consciously getting into the game with the intent to win faster and to win more often. The fifth key is learning all the written and unwritten rules governing the career and the jobs for which you're competing. Not only learn the rules, but apply them with precision and make them work for your benefit and the benefit of others. And as you learn the rules, purposely teach them to the next person who's ready. The sixth rule is what I call a hodgepodge of skills, a hodgepodge of behaviors and experiences that, in my experience, will help push you forward to success. So I'm going to share a couple of these. So, always be developing yourself. Always be expanding your experiences. Create your brand with intentionality. I can tell you from experience that if you don't create a brand will be created for you, and you probably won't like that brand that's created for you. I can't underscore the importance of being healthy in your career, whether that's being physically healthy or mentally or emotionally or spiritually healthy. For you to be successful, you have to be healthy. And then the other thing here is being significant. In the book, Good Is Not Enough, Keith White defined significance this way. He said, "I define significance as investing your success in others in order to perpetuate it beyond your lifetime. Significance demands that you take the attention off your own pursuits, accomplishments, and possessions, and identify ways in which you can leverage your success for the good of others. Significance requires that you somehow use every reward, special recognition, and honor that you receive as a platform to share the lessons of empowerment with others. So as I talk about the sixth rule to being significantly successful and the last rule, keep in mind it's you are your business. And if you want your business to be successful, to thrive, to expand, then you have to continue to develop your business, you have to brand it, and you have to smartly market it, market your business. Develop, brand, and market. So I'll end our time the way I started. The best way for us to collectively succeed as African Americans, as women and minorities, is to be successful individually. Be successful yourself first, then find someone who's ready that you can help succeed. Now, you're not helping people for free. Once you help someone, let them know that what they owe you is to help another person be successful. I'm Curtis Brooks. I make a difference, and you do too. Thank you, guys.